Welcome to the Sentai Podcast with your hosts Sam and Jay. We're here to discuss our favorite anime, interview industry figures, and a whole lot more. Visit sentai.com/podcast to see what we're all about. Today we're talking to Mike Haimoto, who voices Thorfinn in Vinland Saga.
Well, hello, Mike. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of work? What do you do when you're not here in the studio in a booth?
Tend to spend most of my days in a lonely, quiet, dark room. I am outside of being a voice actor. I act on camera, actually. Used to do theater. I don't do it as much. I also work behind the camera. I would say that's actually my day job primarily outside of voice acting is working with on-camera film production. And then, I like long walks on the beach and playing tennis matches with a friend and having brunch and all those wonderful things like that. Yes, I'm a well-rounded human being. Dynamic, you might say.
So that's your perfect Sunday evening, right?
Oh, that's my perfect Tuesday evening. Sunday evening, I like to just go comatose with a bottle of something. Probably can't say that.
Well, it was water, because hydration is important.
That's it. Thank you. Bottle of water or like Dimetap or something. I don't know if kids still use Dimetap.
I don't even know what Dimetap is.
I don't. Guys, I'm going to drink my coffee.
So is voice acting always something you wanted to do, or, is it something you grew into and found you?
You know what? It's funny. Voice acting was something I wanted to do from like literally as early as I can remember. And then it kind of evolved into acting, and then I sort of rediscovered voice acting after the fact. But yeah, literally as early as I can remember, watching, all the Disney afternoon cartoons like DuckTales and Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck and, all the great like early 90s cartoons, Ninja Turtles, all of them. I just was always imitating them, running around. When we'd play Ninja Turtles on the playground, I was the one, idiot kid that was trying to do the voices and all that. So yeah, literally from as early as I can remember, I wanted to voice act. And then as I got older, I was doing, school theater, that kind of thing. I think my first school theater play, I was Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh, which is telling for anyone that knows me. And then, yeah, from high school, I went into to college, took theater in college. And I was doing musical theater for a few years and then got a little burnt out, admittedly, and took some time off and was just working behind the camera. And then eventually I was working with someone named Shelley Black, legendary voice actress. And she was like, hey, you know what? If you're interested in voiceover, that might be something that you could reconnect with. And, ultimately she helped me reconnect with that. I connected with John Swayze, who kind of shepherded me into the industry. And then, no looking back, man.
I never known you to look back, only forward.
That's true. I don't want to know what's behind me.
And now looking at Vinland Saga, you have, a little bit of an important role, that of Thorfinn.
A little bit, yeah.
So how did you prepare for it, and how is Thorfinn different from your other roles you've had before?
Oh, well, so I'll tell you the first part. Preparing for it was a little bit different this go-around because I think, early on, I'd never read Vinland Saga before. I was familiar with it, and I was familiar with the Vinland Sagas, the actual, historical tales that I think were Leif Erikson. But I wasn't familiar with the manga that much. And then I was doing some assistant directing early on the show for the first batch of episodes. And I was kind of just starting to not lose focus on my job, but I was starting to get find myself watching as much as I was listening because I was just getting pulled into it.
You were doing that classic, work.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was great. Now, can we just play the next 5 minutes of this, please? Yeah, thank you. Because it was just such an engrossing, incredible show. And very unlike, a lot of animes that I think we get the chance to work on. But Thorfinn in particular was such a dark and angry, sad, tragic character where I was just really kind of hypnotized by him. And then, eventually I found out, oh, hey, you're playing Thorfinn, which was an amazing opportunity. And I remember I watched a couple of the episodes in the Japanese and was just so blown away by everything that the entire cast was doing there. And I started reading up a little bit more about Thorfinn and sort of what his arc is, and it just settled into this nice, easy to find, angry and emotional place. And the way it works with anime typically is, we get a sort of a loose idea of what we want to do with the character, but the second we walk in, we're instantly adjusting with the director. In this case, Kyle Jones was directing my sessions as Thorfinn. And, you work with him to kind of adjust, kind of tweak, find the character, and then once it really lands, then you're just kind of off to the races with it.
Yeah, and as you said, you are also assistant directing in part of it. How is that different preparing to do that versus the show? But though, that sounds like the show just kind of put its claws in you and you're like, you ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky in that regard. AD, it's very different work. I mean, directing is very different work from acting, obviously, and then AD work is different from that. A lot of what I was doing on the first batch, just because there's so many characters in this show, and it's such an epic scale, I found myself doing a lot of and I mean a lot of, the bit and miscellaneous characters and some of the Wallace sessions and all that. And even then with a show like this, you kind of have to watch ahead a little bit because you need to know what's happening. So I found myself watching ahead on a lot of these big battles. And I mean, again, I think that's probably what instantly hooked me, was just the scale and the beauty of the way they handled these battles. And then when you come in, you've got to be able to tell people, well, you're screaming because of this, and this heave-ho is because you're doing this, So it's a little odd, but it's still something you have to prepare for by watching ahead.
Definitely. And as, everyone should know by this point, we're talking about Vikings.
Yes.
When you found out you're going to be working on it, how much did you know about Vikings? How much did you research into the Vinland Saga, as we say?
Weirdly enough, I have a pretty decent knowledge background on that stuff because when I was in college, I was also a history major, and that was one of the things that I studied quite a bit of. Admittedly, with the Vinland Sagas themselves, I was familiar with them, but I wasn't super knowledgeable about them. So naturally, when I started doing this, it becomes that rabbit hole on Wikipedia and whatever other essay you can find online where it's like, oh, well, okay, so there's this version of the story and there's this version of the story. In this version, Thorfinn was more like this, and in this one, he was more like this. So maybe a combination of those things would be interesting.
Yeah, the infamous Wikipedia rabbit hole. You start somewhere and you end up, learning about wheat harvesting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I ended up on the Dark Crystal or something like that. So what are you going to do? It's a rabbit hole.
And that's how you have the vast knowledge of random things.
Exactly. But yeah, real quick, because I realized I skipped over your question about how different Thorfinn is from other characters I've played. Radically different. Radically different. I mean, 9 times out of 10, when you get me, I'm either the sort of weird, very character-y, what the hell is this guy's problem character, or the really big and hyper one. So being able to switch gears into Thorfinn, which is more of a purely dramatic angle, was such a great opportunity, and I'm really grateful that I got the chance because I don't always get to express those feelings in the anime booth.
Yeah, and as we talked about, you are Thorfinn, but without much spoilers, you're not always Thorfinn because we have a little bit of a time jump, and that's weird for anime. It's unique. How did you approach becoming Thorfinn after a couple episodes of the audience already knowing him in one way?
So I think there is where I had, that's probably where I gained the most benefit from working as an AD on it, because I was able to see those early episodes with young Thorfinn, and I could really see that path from, again, you're going to have to cut this if it's too spoilery, but from happy, small, child who's dreaming of big adventure and all that to someone brought down by the very cold reality of the world they live in. So I was able to see that sort of arc and fall. And so when you get in there, suddenly it's like you've seen the character, you know what their path is, and you can just pick up from where you imagine they are a year later or whatever it actually was. I will say, though, there was a point where when I came in, I actually came in at a younger stage than I thought I was going to be coming in at. So that was a bit of a surprise. And there was that one beginning of the session where it's like, oh my God, how do I sound in between these two voices? Especially because I would argue in some ways that young Thorfinn's voice is almost as deep as mine is as older Thorfinn. So that was sort of an interesting transition, was finding that in-between place, not just in the voice, because that's only part of it. It's that in-between place in the attitude of the character.
And I think everyone who watches Vinland can agree that Thorfinn grew up real quick.
Real quick. He had to, though. I mean, He really had to.
The world showed him what it's like.
Yes, and then he set himself on a path in it, and yeah, it's kind of up to the audience to decide how good or bad that path is.
We sound so foreboding. We swear it's a great show.
It is a wonderful show. Wonderful show.
And this leads great into the next question. As I take it, you are a fan of the show, so you're at a convention. Someone has never known of Vinland Saga before. What is your pitch to them? How do you explain the appeal?
Boy, that is a really good question because it is unlike a lot of animes that we get to see. I would almost say, if you like the epic scale of something like Attack on Titan, or one of those large fantasy shows, but you want to pull it back into the grounded, like dramatic realism of our own history, then this show is for you. I would say beautiful battles, epic score, because the music in this show is incredible and the animation is just breathtaking. All those things. I mean, it's just such a beautifully put together show and so epic that I just don't know how you could pass it up. If you're an anime fan at all, this show has to be something you just check out.
Me and Sam talked about this a lot in the introduction episode. It is unlike almost everything. It is unique and it does everything it does so well.
Yeah.
Because first off, it's based in, England, Northern Europe, which is rare for anime. And
right.
It's Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There are historical animes out there, not a ton of them that are based on true history, but often when they are, it's, Japanese history. I'm trying to think if there are any examples I can think of off the top of my head of like that more European history-driven show.
There's a few, because me and Sam did go down this rabbit hole, and we both agreed as soon as this episode goes out, they're going to list every single one.
I'm sure, yeah. In the comments section will be, here's 15 examples you guys didn't think of, and thank you, I'll check them all out. Yeah, you know what I do think sometimes is, in a weird way, if anyone's familiar with the anime Berserk, it's a lot like Berserk minus the fantasy elements. I feel like in terms of just the scale and at times the darkness of it. And I mean psychological darkness.
I drew that same kind of parallel. And it was also refreshing for me to have a anime about Vikings, and it wasn't about Thor, Loki, and
exactly
Odin.
Right, yeah. And I mean, I think that gives you an opportunity to explore just a different aspect of them. I mean, because it's not just the big, beefy, smash all the shields kind of Vikings. I mean, you've got characters in there like Aslaugt and Canute who are just so fascinating from a psychological standpoint. And I think that's what really drew. I mean, I'll tell you right now, my favorite character is actually probably Aslaugt, who's just always got wheels turning in his head. And it's a side of Vikings that we don't always get to explore in media, which is just the very cerebral and strategic and psychological side of it all.
And how great of a sailors they had to be to cross that, narrow sea.
Exactly, yeah. So it's unlike anything I've ever seen in an anime, and I really love that about this show.
Yeah, and turning away from Vinland Saga, because I have a feeling if we get going too down the rabbit hole, we'll be here for hours.
We could. And I'm trying to do all of this while not spoiling things, too, for people who haven't seen it or read it.
Which, if you want to talk about spoilers, of course, find us on social, because we will talk and talk.
You can ping me for sure, and I'll get on a long conversation about it with you.
So, other projects you're working on, because, Mike's always busy, right?
Hopefully.
Do you have any that you can tell the fans about?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this is there's always new projects out there. There's plenty of really cool things coming right out of Sentai that I can't talk about just yet. Other studios, I just had the new Prince of Tennis drop, so that's a really exciting thing to be part of, another long-running and iconic franchise. So, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out. And the nature of our business is I just can't always say what it is yet.
Yes, and there's also, I worked on this thing months ago, and it'll be out soon, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, yep, guys, worked on some really cool stuff. Can't wait to tell you about it. I'll see you next year.
Nature of the beast.
Nature of the beast. And hopefully also, we're remembering all the things we worked on months ago.
What haven't we asked you about with Vinland Saga that you want to tell us about, that you're dying, that people need to know?
Again, I'm trying to think of how to answer that without just getting into spoilery, story material and all that. But what I will say is the cast in this show does such phenomenal work. I mean, this is always a danger in anime where you kind of get caught listening to the other people around you. in this show, there are so many wonderful actors where I would get caught listening. Thorkel, Ashlod were two of my favorite characters and favorite performances in the world. I can't wait for everyone to hear these voices. Joe Daniels as Thorkel is just one of my favorite performances I think I've heard in years. It's just so electric and fun, and he makes this character just hilarious and terrifying at the same time. And then David Wald as Ashlod. I mean, it's David Wald. There's always just that crackling magnetism in his performances, but with a character like Ashlod, where the wheels are always turning, it's just incredible. I could get lost listening to him just talk about his plans for dinner, I think, at this point. He's just so engrossing in that role.
He's kind of the character that his plans for dinner, but it will affect breakfast, which will affect you and do exactly what I want.
My plans for dinner actually affect the entire geopolitical structure of the nation. So, yes, the acting is really phenomenal. And I think, Kyle Jones and John Swayze did a phenomenal job of bringing in a great cast and piecing it all together. And I'm really excited for people to hear what we've done on this show.
Thorfinn goes through this traumatic, event, and then he is driven by one thing: revenge.
Mm-hmm.
That, in my view, became his, signature character trait. He is driven.
Right.
He's motivated. Did you find that the same kind of way? Did you see deeper into him that he had other wants?
I'm actually with you where the way I saw it, at least up till this point in the plot, his singular focus is revenge. There are layers to that I think complicate it for him psychologically, especially when you consider who he wants revenge against primarily and the sort of strange dynamic and relationship that he develops around that character. It certainly, I think, complicates it, but I think ultimately for me, that singular focus of revenge ultimately sets up the big question of, all right, you get revenge, what now? What's your life beyond this moment? And I think to me that's actually one of the most compelling things is yes, he wants revenge. He has not stopped in his entire,
what happens when you kill Moby Dick?
Exactly. I mean, he hasn't considered at all what's next for him. It's like he's put this period at the end of his story, but there's so much story beyond that period, and he hasn't given it any thought. And I think there's a point in the series where that's going to kind of confront him a little bit. If he's immediately ready to hear that or recognize that, I can't say. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that singular focus on revenge really dominates him as a character, and it's really about finding the questions that need to be asked of his life moving forward as we go.
Yeah, and the other striking thing in this show with Vikings is when you picture a Viking, you think of a 7-foot, 400-pound dude that could crush you with his pinky.
Right.
Thorfinn is not that.
No, that's definitely Thorkel, but that is not Thorfinn at all. Thorfinn is fast and small and agile and just scrappy. And by scrappy, I mean he will feral.
Bite your
right.
Achilles off.
It's like throwing a feral cat into a Viking battle, and it's just like going to scratch and claw and bite at everything it sees. It's odd. I would say he's almost that true berserker. That idea that we get for a lot of Vikings where they just go into this certain berserker mode, and we've got that in the show. But Thorfinn's almost that same thing, just in a much smaller, scrappier package.
The anger is concentrated in him.
Yeah, and I mean, my God, that anger will come out in the battles. I mean, some of the fight scenes are just so intense. I remember, I remember after some of them, I'm just like, okay, guys, I'm going to need a week before we record again, so just calm down.
Did you have that same reaction of before you record watching it and just go, damn?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, that character is not afraid to scream at any age. And I mean, when I say scream, I mean screams. And they last, and they build, and they're huge. And yeah, I'll admit, I think that was the key thing in the audition process was, all right, let's hear how you handle this big scream. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And then 5 minutes later, I'm done with the first scream. So yeah, I think that's mentally one of those things where you're like, okay, Let me remember all my mechanical training and just support the hell out of this scream coming up.
It is screamful. And what me and Sam talked about, what I brought up was, to literary fans, it is very grim dark, which is, a newer trend, but it is driven partly from this violence and this violent age. If you live to 40, whoa, you old.
You're an old man, yeah, for sure.
And it was not a, peaceful, prosperous time, but seeing these characters living their daily life and seeing them try to become more and get revenge.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Thorfinn is, unfortunately, when he first starts out, he's a pretty happy kid with, just normal dreams of adventure and, a happy life in a village in a beautiful land with family and friends. And things happen to change that, and then he is completely shaped by the violence of the world, and it changes his trajectory entirely.
And his entire village and every boy Viking growing up, war is what you want. War is amazing. You will prosper. You will bring home loot.
Right.
And he sees firsthand, no.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the important pieces of the puzzle early on is, the older villagers, they're not as gung-ho about war, but the younger ones who don't remember what it was truly like are like, yeah, war and glory, and this is our way. And then you find out the actual price of that, and that how dark and heavy that actually is. And I think that's one of the things the show tackles so beautifully is the weight of war and the weight of violence on your soul.
And the weight not just on the people we're following, but the people around, the locals,
That's absolutely true.
They lost their son, their daughter, and everything else.
Yeah. And there's this sort of very dark cost-benefit analysis in everything you do. It's like, to gain what we have to succeed, to win, to live, what do we have to give up? What's it going to cost? Season 2 is just announced. I will tell you, I'll admit to you guys, there's, I think, currently 11 volumes of Vinland Saga out in the manga that you can read. As soon as I finished recording, I went and bought and read all 11 of them. So, yeah, obviously I would not get into the story moving forward, but I think, to your point, Thorfinn in season 1, it's like his prologue. It's, here's my quest for vengeance, what lies beyond it? And that's where season 2 will certainly pick up and go, is what lies beyond for Thorfinn? What is his life meant to be now?
I think what we can say without spoiling is the story is bigger than you think at every stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, this is already such an epic story. It's such an epic story, and the life-changing moments for all the characters involved, and to your point, all the people around them, the scale is indescribable almost. And then you find out it's just a small piece of it. It's just the prologue. It's just that taste of what these characters are going to have to go through and deal with. And what that does is set the stage for something truly epic. I think is that a safe way to put it, I guess?
As safe as we can get.
Yeah.
As you talk about the manga, the anime, we can hear that you are a fan. So you want to tell us your other shows that you love?
Well, I will say there's a show I actually had the chance to work on that I really loved called Sleepy Princess in the Demon's Castle. It's very 90s in its style and comedy. And I will say, when it comes to me with anime, I'll admit I'm a little stuck in time where I still love my old 90s animes. Like, I love Slayers and I love Neon Genesis and, even some of the earlier, titles from the early 2000s, the Cowboy Bebops, Outlaw Star, all those ones.
The ones we have to walk 15 miles in the snow uphill to the Suncoast video.
We had to go up to Suncoast and pay $40 a VHS tape for 3 episodes.
And be happy about it.
And be real happy about it, and then wait 9 months for the next one to come out. So, yeah, I think that was the big thing for me, is I just love those old shows. So anything that really kind of like feels like that old 90s, early 2000s
the
show.
Nostalgic vibes.
Yeah. So Sleepy Princess and the Demon's Castle is just a great sort of like weird oddball comedy that just felt along the line. Like, it felt like it belonged in the 90s. I do love Attack on Titan. I mean, who doesn't at this point? It's just so epic and so dark and intense. And yeah, I really do think that it's got a lot of similar vibes to Vinland Saga, just, clearly more fantasy driven. But then I do just like, I like the little sweet slice of life comedies, if I'm being honest. I watch shonen anime, but I've gotten to this point where I find myself watching more slice of life ones. Tata Never Falls in Love, was a great example.
Yeah, if you're working on Vinland Saga all day, you want something lighter.
You kind of want that palate cleanser, right? You kind of want to just let me get my sweet high school romance and friendship is all it takes, guys, and, all that stuff, where it's free of knives, free of maiming, and it's all just like, I have a crush on you. I'm going to leave a letter in your locker after school.
And the only screaming is excited screaming.
Yeah, exactly. Or, oh my God, look at that bug. So, yeah.
And no mic screaming. That's the important part.
No mic screaming, yeah. Well, those screams, the comedy screams are a different beast, and those are actually a lot of fun to do. I actually really enjoy all the screaming. I know that's a weird thing to say, but in anime, one of the best things in the world is I can scream like I can't in any other medium, so...
And our audio engineer is just like, turn it down.
I know. I know. I'm like looking at our engineer right now, and I'm like, I'm sorry for all my past grievances against you. Just turn it all the way to the bottom. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, outside of that, I'll admit, I tend to watch more film than television, I think. I watch a lot of, sci-fi, a lot of old Westerns. I know that's an odd thing, but I grew up loving old Westerns, and I think that's probably because I grew up watching old samurai films, and they're very similar genres.
Sometimes shot-for-shot remakes.
Sometimes shot-for-shot remakes. I won't name names. But yeah, so I watch a lot of film. I mean, that was my background really in school was film history and filmmaking. So I find myself watching a lot of older film and, as many new ones as possible. I still love, like, current shows. I love Westworld. Westworld is that sort of perfect blend for me where it's that heavy, heady sci-fi, but with that beautiful, like, genre mashing, Western samurai film mixed in.
And a little bit of that. It's a bigger story than you think.
Much bigger story than you think. And, I love shows that ask questions about, our choices and whether it's our agency, our power to make choices, or what are our choices leading us to, a la Vinland Saga. Those are the things I really like is I love the shows that ask those questions of ourselves more than anything.
As always, just a deeper answer than I expected.
Well, hopefully it wasn't too rambling, but I'm trying to contain my TED Talk that I want to launch into right now.
I mean, if we're going to, I know this is an interview with me or you, not me. I know this is an interview with you, but just on my side, and I will tell everyone about this, we've just been watching the Muppets in my house.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. The Muppets are on my TV at least 3 times a week in some form or another. If it's not the Muppet Show, thank God that's back out. I'm watching any one of the Muppet movies. I have all the Muppet Babies episodes still. I'll watch that. But if it's none of that, I'm playing those YouTube clips constantly.
Just modern classics.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. No, and trust me, the Muppets is like the best. And I mean the best training you can get for voiceover. Even if it's just watching it. And, you can't come in here and do a Kermit voice in anime. But if you can learn to develop those muscles like a lot of us did, watching cartoons and Muppets, you're set. If you can do that, you're set.
And Muppet Haunted Mansion coming out this October.
I know, I'm excited about that. How do you feel? I gotta ask, how do you feel about the new voice of Kermit that Matt Vogel took over a couple years ago for Steve Whitmire?
I got used to it, but...
You do get used to it. I do think there's this weird irony. I don't know if you've seen Muppets Most Wanted.
Yes, I've seen all the Muppets.
Muppets Most Wanted, where Kermit is captured and held prisoner by a fake Kermit. And the real Kermit was voiced by Steve Whitmire still, who voiced him, from the 80s, ever since Jim Henson's death, I believe. So my whole childhood. And then the fake Kermit was voiced by Matt Vogel, who has since taken over the role. So there's just a weird irony in that, where the last project that Steve Whitmire really did on screen was the one where the fake Kermit kind of comes and usurps him. And now we've got that. That is not a criticism of Matt Vogel, because he's an amazing actor and puppeteer.
My wife, I've gotten into the Muppets, she's like, that's Gonzo? He looks so different. He sounds different.
Does he?
From the original show?
Oh, well, from the Muppet Show? Yeah, I mean, from 50 years ago. Sure he does.
I'm like, they all look different. You know, Miss Piggy is a chorus girl.
Right. And, they pretty much all have new voice actors at this point.
Well, 50 years.
Yeah. But, I mean, the wild thing is it's really like you could boil it down to 3 primary voice actors for all of them. And that's insane.
I mean, I don't think we could produce anime with their budget they had then.
No. But, my God, if we had, 3 guys that could do all those voices, maybe we could. I don't know. But you know what? What am I saying? We can all do that. Yeah, we can all do all those voices, guys. We're amazing.
With the power of friendship or something.
That's right. Hands in, heart of the cards, all of that stuff. Yeah, for sure.
The Planeteers unite.
We've really fallen down a weird path here. So.
Oh, this is Gaul getting cut out. But Ricardo will keep it forever like he always does.
Do you want to thank him? Play us out.
Yeah, thank me.
Someone cut his mic. With that, Mike, I want to say thank you. Anything else for the fans?
Watch it, and then we can come back and have a real talk about Vinland Saga.
Yeah, we'll try to put a spoiler episode like a year from now that we can talk.
Absolutely, like the spoiler version of the Vinland Saga podcast. But yeah, no, seriously though, go out and watch the show. It's so beautiful, it's so grand, and I just couldn't be more excited about an anime than I could be for Vinland Saga.
Thanks for listening to the Sentai Podcast. This episode was brought to you by HiDive, where you can stream thousands of hours of anime for $4.99 a month. Visit hidive.com for details. Thanks to our guest, Mike Haimoto, our host, Jay Perez, our producer, Tom Helberg, and our editor, Connor Clifton. Thanks for tuning in.